All right. So people are starting to join in. Hello, everyone who's joining us. If you want to say hello in the chat, you're more than welcome to. You can say where you're coming from today. We have people from all over Muskoka and beyond. So you can do that just using that chat feature down there. Oh, wonderful. Hello from Lake of Bays. Excellent. So if you have any questions as we go, we do have a Q&A button down there as well, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of the talk. So if you have questions, it doesn't matter when you put them in there, we'll look at all of them at the end. So if you have questions now, you can get them in there first, but it will be open the whole time. And hello from Port Carling. And we'll just give it a few minutes because we're just at 7 o'clock now, and we will get this going. Oh, and from Gravenhurst, wonderful. So you have people from all over Muskoka joining in. That's nice to see. There better be some people from the Bracebridge Library as well, so you can say hello. And we're just going to give it a few more minutes for everyone to join in. Oh, and from London, hello. Thank you so much for joining. From Huntsville, hello. Oh, and from Toronto, hello. All right, so this is a Zoom webinar for people who have joined us before. You'll know how it goes. So we do have the chat feature and we have the Q&A. So if you have questions, please pop them in the Q&A and we'll get to that at the end of the talk. The chat is great for saying hello, where you're from. If you have comments about things, you can definitely share that in the chat feature. Because it's a Zoom webinar, we can't see you and we can't hear you, but we are recording this. So if you want to watch it later, if you have to leave for whatever reason, if you want to share it with your friends, you'll be able to find it on your library's YouTube channel. And we also have a lot of our other author talks posted up on our YouTube channel, so you can see that. I know the Bracebridge Public Library is a little bit behind in posting ours, but I know that the other libraries have been really good at putting them up right away. So lots of people from Bracebridge joining in. Wonderful. Hi, everybody. If you decide that you would like your very own copy of When We Lost Our Heads at the end of the night, you can contact your local Muskoka library. You can do that tonight, you can do that tomorrow morning. What we do is we collect all the numbers for everyone who wants books, and then we contact the publisher and they send them to us, and then they go to the libraries, and then you can pick up your book and pay for it at the library. And each book comes with a signed book plate. So if you would like one, make sure that you contact your library either tonight or tomorrow morning. If you have already purchased the book and you would like a signed book plate, then just let your library know, because we can get an extra one for you, so you can pop that in your own copy. If you are interested in these talks, please join your library's newsletter, join their social media pages, because we have lots of amazing authors coming up this year, and all the different libraries take a turn. So you might have someone from Muskoka Lakes or from Gravenhurst or from Huntsville moderating the next one. So it's lots of fun. So make sure that you are joining your library's newsletter, or you can usually pick it up in print as well at the library, that you're following the website's social media, so you can find out what's coming up next. And let's see how we're doing. Just going to make sure that people are all getting in okay. and then we'll get this started. All right, so we begin this event by acknowledging that Muskoka is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, specifically the Chippewa and the Ojibwe peoples, and the Algonquin. We also recognize the Wattamohawks who relocated to Muskoka in 1881. The treaties for the land we live on are the J. Collins Land Purchase of 1785 and the Williams Treaty of 1923. We are thankful for the opportunity to meet here and reaffirm our commitment and our promise and challenge of the truth and reconciliation here in our community. My name is Sarah McNeil, and I am one of the Information and Digital Services librarians at the Bracebridge Public Library. Our guest tonight is best-selling novelist, short story writer, essayist, Heather O'Neill. Her novels have received so much and very well-deserved acclaim, and I know we are all thrilled to have her with us tonight. So welcome, Heather. The book that we are talking about tonight is her newest novel. I have it here. And it is When We Lost Our Heads, and it is gorgeous. And it is a spellbinding story about two young women whose friendship is so intense, it not only threatens to destroy them, it changes the course of history. And if you just want to say in the chat, if you've read it already, you let us know. We won't have any spoilers in this conversation, but if you have already read it, we'd love to know. The book has kind of two main female characters. There's Marie Antoine, and she's the charismatic, spoiled daughter of a sugar baron. And of course, Sadie Arnett, who is dark-haired, sly, and brilliant. And it talks about their childhood, growing up together, and the havoc that they wreak on Montreal. If you are unfamiliar with Heather O'Neill's writing, then you'll be in for a treat because it is quirky, it's delicious, and you will have so much fun reading her books. So I highly recommend it, especially her new book, When We Lost Our Heads. So Heather, what inspired you to write this book?
Thank you, Sarah. It's nice to be here. And thanks for the Ontario Library Service and everybody joining in. What inspired me to write this book? A lot of things. I think I sort of had this idea all of a sudden. I really was interested in that time period, Victorian Montreal or the Industrial Revolution, when Montreal was sort of just literally being built in all the neighborhoods. And then I had saw a painting when I was kind of researching this time, and it was an ice ball, and there were some girls who were dressed up as French Revolutionary characters like Robespierre and Marie Antoinette. And then I had this funny idea of what if I sort of took these figures and made them into young girls who were in the Victorian era and dealing, as opposed to the sort of lower class, upper class issues of the French Revolution, but they were relating it back to women because it was at the beginning of the first wave of feminism. So you have all these very young Victorian women who are actually these kind of very ambitious, bloodthirsty revolutionaries. And I love that juxtaposition. So I kind of took the novel from there and built it.
Mm-hmm. And you were born and raised in Montreal, and you live in Montreal. You're joining us from Montreal. And I really felt that Montreal almost felt like another character or another few characters in the book. Mm-hmm. Was there any other tie-ins that you really chose to write about Montreal, or is it just your home and you love it?
I guess probably primarily because it's my home, and I've sort of just always been interested. I mean, wherever I am, I'm sort of interested in the origins of a city and how it comes to be. I like cities. I like cities as living, breathing beings who kind of take on characteristics and become almost magical realists. I mean, that's how I always saw the city. And Montreal just does have a kind of like a fascinating history, and it's a very romantic city. So everybody's kind of regarded its history or turns it into these little romantic stories. So like you grew up, I grew up in Montreal just hearing stories about the underworld and gangsters and all this sort of wonderful bad behavior we've always engaged in, but I've been very proud of. So I always liked, I think that way of spinning Montreal into a story kind of touched me as a child. And I started doing that just in an intuitive way. And yeah, I've always found little interesting historical parts and ideas about Montreal that have inspired me. I mean, so far.
Yeah. What kind of research did you do for the book other than collecting these stories?
Research was actually it was pretty wide ranging because I was taking two historical periods and putting them together, but then at the same time I'm talking about very contemporary issues. So, but anyways, as far as the two periods, I had to research the Victorian era in Montreal and the Golden Mile, which is the aristocratic neighborhood that I describe, was easier because it's still there and you can kind of go visit different places, and they kind of historically they have so many records of their ridiculous balls that they've had or different societies. So there was a lot to kind of go through and get the fabric of it and the sense of what it would be like to go on the top of the hill. And of course, when I went down to the bottom of the hill and wanted to create the squalid mile, that area doesn't exist anymore. It was like, just shoddily built. So I had to really go into museum archives to find anything and search for, so my dog's gonna start howling. It won't last long. It's a Chihuahua. I just really wanted to, I think it was an opera singer in his last life, but then probably did something horrible for a role. And now he's condemned to be a Chihuahua.
Oh no. I feel like we've all learned to, yes, deal with pets and Zoom, and it's been an interesting challenge for all of us, but we might have to see him.
I'm only pausing because I can't hear a thing. Okay, great. He's finished his concerto. So anyway, so going down, it was really difficult to find just the way the streets looked and how a brothel. So I was looking into sex workers at that time and that kind of stuff. Like, as I said in the book, it's a lot of unwritten history and the history of women. So kind of, especially with lower class women and the way they lived, was very hard to find. And then I was looking for details of some of the most fascinating stuff was within the factories, because we think of the Industrial Revolution as such an era that was driven by men, and we just visualize men going to the factory. But so many women worked in the factory, and starting when they were quite young, and little girls were all in the factory, and they had quite very dangerous jobs of jumping in between going into the machines while they were working and cleaning them out of scraps with their tiny fingers. And just horrible things were happening, and they got paid next to nothing. So it was just all that, just searching and searching. And then of course, then I went to look at the French Revolutionary characters, that I wanted each one to have a tiny sort of echo or inspiration. But that was a little bit, I had always been researching the French Revolution because I just, even as a child, was so fascinated by the characters and personalities from the revolution who all sort of started as writers and orators. And I was very interested in the power of the text and what it does in a revolution, how the power of any text can sort of completely undo a society.
Mm-hmm. And there's lots of writers and orators in the book as well. So how do you think you have more fun writing about writers than other characters, or is there a difference in writing about them?
I mean, I suppose because I always am the character in the book who's the writer is Sadie Arnett, who I kind of based her a bit on the character of the Marquis de Sade, who was from the word sadism, who was this famous pornographer at the time. So she wants to become this world famous pornographer and write all these erotic books for women. And so writing a writer is very fun because I have the same passion. So I just know what goes into it. And even every time that Sadie begins writing in the novel, she discovers writing as a child and she just becomes addicted to it. And that feeling of the pen just being like a magic wand and you put it on the page and anything can come out of it. The most subversive, crazy, radical thing that's in your head, you can just put on the page. So Sadie's pen, whenever she starts to write, like her words turn into ribbons and birds and floating things, because I just wanted to capture that feeling that I get when I write in a notebook, and the sort of the way it just absorbs you, it makes you feel in some way just so omnipotent, even though it's over this small fictional world, but you're just world building, and it's so satisfying.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot in your book about women and women in relationships, but also women in power and lots of different power dynamics and stuff. And I don't know that I would have put together like the French Revolution and feminism, but the way that you do it in your book is just amazing, and it makes so much sense. Feminism has been going through lots of changes recently, and a lot of the things that you talk about and a lot of the themes that are pulled are things that have been happening in the news, like with white women and Black women and what it means to be a white feminist. Were these things that were actively in your mind when you were writing the novel?
Oh, absolutely. It's sort of, that's what I would, the question of feminism, because these women, first they're living in that era, the Victorian era. Everything a woman did was curtailed, like from the way she spoke, the way she laughed, the way she presented herself at the dinner table. So, and they wore crinoline, so they were just literally in cages. They put on a cage and then they put their dress over top it. So there was very much discussion about how one breaks out of these gender roles, how one becomes ambitious and pursues one's goals. But then there is also, Sadie and Marie are both incredibly, although they're delightful and I adore them, they are very problematic figures in that they have what is sometimes referred to as white feminism or girl boss feminism, or a feminism that isn't intersectional. All they care about, all they're taking from feminism is that they want to succeed and they are going to push everybody out of their way. And then Marie gets to the top of this. She becomes this sugar baron of sorts, and she becomes even worse than any of the male bosses. And then it questions, then a lot of the other women in the book who are part of the revolution just question this. And they're like, is that the goal of feminism, just to become as outrageous and domineering as men? Was it not to destroy the patriarchy so we could all sort of improve, and women from the lower classes, from more diverse backgrounds? So yeah, it definitely challenges that in different ways of looking at feminism and what exactly is a goal of feminism, instead of seeing it in this sort of capitalistic, like one woman breaks the ceiling and just joins the men and leaves all the other women at the bottom.
Yeah. And the great thing is with your book is that it's not heavy-handed at all. I think it is seamless. It just flows so wonderfully in the story. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, this. So it was super enjoyable. And I really liked that.
I was just gonna say those are like the themes, and it's like, but you could read the book without the themes. Like at the core, it's like this crazed love story of two young girls who become completely obsessed about each other. So you can, that's a fun thing. I mean, that's why I love literary fiction, is you can read it on so many levels. You could just read it for the joy of following along these completely audacious, radical and disturbing young psychopathic women. Or you can, and then you can, if you think about it more, there's all these other layers to it.
Yeah, I guess because at the heart of it, it is about their friendship.
Mhm.
Did you, I mean, I doubt that you based it off of, I hope you didn't base it off of a friendship, because it's a very destructive friendship. But did you have any friendships that you kind of pulled experiences from, or any like famous friendships that you were like, oh, this is what I'm going to write about here?
I think what I did was I think I did kind of base it on the sort of intense relationships that I've had over the course of my life. And I was so interested in also kind of showing the darker edges to friendship, because we always think about friends as being supportive and wonderful and close to us. But friends are also like the people who affect us the most. We just have these other like underlying feelings where we're so jealous, we get afraid of them succeeding, we hate the fact that we're just so adoring of them, and like we have this need, a fundamental need as a human, to be independent. So when someone, we become so obsessed with someone, then you just secretly somehow want them to perish so that you can have your freedom back, even though you adore them. So I was interested in those complexities of friendship that I don't always, I hadn't always read talked about, especially with female friendships. It was always, yeah, I like the sort of dark undercurrents that for any kind of love, there's always something twisted in it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a lot of times you run into the more softer versions of friendship in books. So it was a fun change to see something so different. I think especially with things like social media, there's definitely this feeling of like one-upping people around you. So
Yeah. Or maybe it's me. It's funny because when you do these talks, you're like, maybe I'm just revealing like these crazy sides of myself. And I'm like, when you just want to murder your friends, and everyone's like, no, no, Heather, we don't. I'm like, oh, sorry. As a writer, you just kind of dig inside yourself and you find these things, and you assume that the readers will know of these things too.
yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think that maybe bodes well for your friends, but it definitely definitely makes a great book. We have tons of writers in Muskoka. We have lots of aspiring authors and people who are publishing with small presses. What is your process like when you get started on a book?
um Process, usually I'll have that sort of general idea, which somehow comes to me visually as just something excites me about the idea, and there's something unknowable about it too, because once you go in, you're going to be spending a few years. So it's always something new and something that provokes me and that I want to work on. But then the actual, I think it depends. I think with this one particularly, I worked on first the characters, because I wanted to have first my cast of characters, and then I was going to see how they interacted and related, and which was an interesting process because I had invented them, and I originally didn't really know who was going to be my main character. I thought it would probably be the one based on Robespierre, just because I love that historical figure. So I went in thinking that Robespierre would probably be the principal character. But then Marie and Sadie, they as soon as I created them, with any scene they were in, they just fought for the attention. You couldn't notice anybody else. They were so domineering. And then they met each other and they just kind of fell in love. And every time I wrote, like, because I just do sketches to kind of build the tone and what it will feel like. And yeah, like Sadie and Marie, every time they got together were so intense. It was like, it was just like two girls who had met and they had that cooked food the way they do in the book. So they sort of became the main characters. And then I built the idea of a plot around it.
That's I mean, it totally makes sense that they would take over.
Yeah.
From
They
of course they took over.
They're so excessive.
And of course they took like the spotlight away from Mary. Like that's just makes sense. Yes. Yeah, we had one comment saying that they're really enjoying the discussion, but they haven't read the book yet. So don't worry. We're not, I mean, there's so many things that happen in the book, and we won't spoil the details for you. Yeah, did you have an idea about like the ending, or was that kind of did things happen as a surprise, or we're not, now that we just said no spoilers, but
I did have an idea for the ending, but I didn't know how it was going to get there, because I just knew there was this, like, because I was also writing it almost as a structure of a Victorian novel, and growing up I adore Victorian novels with their ridiculous like twists and the grandiose like worlds they create. So I knew there was like these big surprises, but it was took a lot of patience and work to build a novel that would allow these shocking things to be revealed, and secrets and what's not. That's always fun. Like when you have when you create something that the reader is supposed to pick up clues along the way without knowing they're picking up clues. So that's always really fun as a writer, to put in these details that are going to stick with them, but they don't know why they're sticking with them. But you don't want to make it obvious that it's sticking with them, because they'll guess all the intrigue and conclusions.
it's definitely fun as a reader too, because then it lends itself to rereading. So you can be like, oh wait, didn't that happen? And then you can go back and feel like you can read it again and enjoy all those little bits because you're in on the secret now. So
that's, yeah, because then as a writer, it's like when you have these kind of twists at the end, it makes the reader reread it in their head anyways. It forces you to somehow go like, oh, and then you go back and you reread it anyways, even if you don't want to go back. So you make it's fun. I find that rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. And it's really good for discussion. So I mean, if there's book clubs who are looking for a book, I mean, there's lots of stuff to talk about in the book, which is great. I know I was listening to some of your other events that you've done on YouTube, and there's so many things that people talk about and pick up. So people can go on definitely and watch some of those and have new things discussed. One thing I saw was that it took you 3 years to write the book. So is that average for you, or is that a bit longer?
I think it is. I mean, I've written 5 books, so it's hard to average out, but I think it's about averaging maybe a bit shorter, maybe a bit long. Yeah, I don't know, but not, I'd say like 3 years is a good kind of period, but it was 5 years from my last book because I had started writing one that I was not happy with, so I had to throw it away. And because it's really funny, you just don't know when you're writing sometimes. You go, I mean, that's a terror. That's why it's terrifying. I mean, terrifying, whatever. Everyone's using such extreme words and language these days. That's one of the something that's trepidatious about writing novels is you can just go for you have an idea, then you pursue it for years, and then you realize it wasn't actually a good idea. And then when do you abandon it? Because all novels at some point you desperately want to abandon. So I don't know. Yeah, sometime between 3 and 5 years, I guess, is the average. I always
You
think I always have this idea like my next book, I'm gonna just do it in like 6 months, but it's or like
yeah,
a year, but it's just impossible.
like James Patterson.
No, James Patterson has a whole team of people, he has like 10 people writing his books. I don't know, like 10 Heathers.
Oh no. Oh my goodness. Are you working on something? Well, do you know if you're working on something now? Are you?
Yeah, I'm working on another novel that's kind of, I'm not say too much about it, but it's like a fable set in this imaginary country, which tells you nothing, I know, but I'm just superstitious about talking about my novels before they're done, partially because I feel like if I talk about them and they'll sound like so ridiculous, I'll just like lose all faith in them. But because they do sometimes they sound ridiculous when you're working on them. I actually remember I was talking to this writer in Montreal, and then when Martel was living in Montreal and he was finishing Life of Pi, and this other writer said, "Oh my God, I ran into like Jan Martel, and he told me what he's working on, and I just felt so sorry for him. Like he's really lost his mind." Which of course went on to be Life of Pi. But yeah, I saw him on the street corner. He's like, "Yes, I'm writing a book about a little boy in a boat with a tiger." And my friend was like, "Jan has lost the plot, man."
Yeah, but that shows you, right? You never know. You never know.
Exactly. And you don't know what these ideas, sometimes you think you have the most amazing idea that's foolproof, but then it just doesn't work on the page. And then sometimes that's why I always do these kind of little sketches and scenes to see how that idea, if it's gonna translate into an actual story. And somehow just there's just a feeling like the words vibrate in a different way when it's working.
Yeah, no. Did you have any advice for writers who are starting out or who are struggling as they go?
Um, I think just writing all the time is really important. And there's you just have to write and write. Like when you first start writing, it's almost as though you have like terrible, terrible words inside you. And it's practicing like an instrument. Like if you pick up a violin, it's just not going to sound good. But it's like that with writing. You just write. And that's how I always think of it. Like you're just exercising all the bad lines and ideas out. And once they're out, then all of a sudden, one day after I don't know how many years, then it starts to have this voice which resonates with you. And you're like, oh, that's what I was after. So I guess it's just practice, and then also showing. I think it's really important. Like also I show in this book, like the writer character has a friend who's an editor, and they always go back and forth. I think it's really, really important if you find like a community who can help you write. So if you join a writing group or a class at the library, like just the power of showing someone else what you're writing, it just you just end up editing it, making it better. I don't think there's any way to kind of do it secretly in your room to produce a novel. You have to just throw the pieces out where they go.
Yeah. And not be disheartened if they tell you a tiger with a little boy in a boat is silly.
That is true.
I'm just going to take a second to remind everyone that we do have the Q&A down at the bottom. So if you have questions as we go, then please, please, please put your questions in the Q&A section, because there's no questions in there yet. So you could for sure have your question answered if you put it in the Q&A. And was there any favorite part that you had in your book, or favorite character, something that you especially love and would like everyone to?
Um, I sometimes like, I like to do these little set pieces sometimes in my novels. So there's this scene, there's like an interlude in the book where I had, because one of the few male characters is Marie's father, whose name is Louis. And he's this, he's like a philanderer he's just a sex addict, and is essentially, and he's always sleeping with lower class women and maids, and just takes advantage of everybody. But then he has all these illegitimate children all over Montreal. So there's this scene where I just look at all these little girls in Montreal who are possibly his illegitimate children. And that was really fun because they just have the strangest jobs. I was just looking for the most absurd places you could put little girls. So I was looking through and finding Victorian occupations for children, which are always fascinating. So there's one girl who works with the collecting of rats, because you could sell rats to like dog fights and stuff. And there's one who goes and gets leeches, and one who's grave robbers. So there are all these and chimney sweeps. So extraordinary little jobs for young girls within the Victorian era. And I remember just having a lot of fun with that, just visually, and the little, like these little delicate young funny little girls in the midst of all the horror and squalor that was the turn of the century.
Yeah. I really enjoyed those like kind of little scenes, or almost like I think like a tableau in like a vaudeville show when there's like little spotlights. You did that for the women at the brothel as well, which was delightful. So that was really enjoyable.
It's funny because a lot of people bring up that scene to me, because when you write a book, you don't actually know what's going to resonate with people, and then there's stuff you think everyone's going to like, we're going to blow their minds, but nobody mentions it. But then there'll be some other thing that people get really attached to, and that brothel scene like comes up again and again, because I just introduce all the women who are working at this brothel, and yeah, people find it just moving and exciting. So I was really glad to be able to do that, because I did a lot of thinking about sex workers in that time and how they lived and the agency they had, things like that. So I was glad they kind of came alive in not a cartoonish way, but in this very compassionate, fun way. And each of them kind of was speaking to the reader.
Mm-hmm. I think for people, who maybe aren't familiar with your writing, there's a lot of kind of cheek and humor, and it was compassionate, and you did learn a lot, but it was clever and funny. So that was very fun. So we're starting to.
I always try and put humor in my work. Like when I'm writing it, it's always like joyful and funny, no matter how hard it is, because humor is just a way of opening the human heart. So when you make somebody laugh, you can communicate so much to them at that point, and you give them away. It's also inviting somebody in and saying, you don't have to react in a certain way. You don't have to look down on this. You don't have to feel sorry. Just come in and see it. And that's why so many comedians come from terrible backgrounds, because it's a wonderful gift. It's like, I will tell you these horrors, this squalor, but I'm going to tell it in a way that makes you laugh. And it's such a generous act, I find.
Because there's definitely very serious topics and tragic topics and horrible topics that your book touches on as well. So I think the humor definitely helps with that. I'm seeing we have a couple of questions coming in the chats and some in the Q&A as well. So just if you're asking a question, we do ask that you put it in the Q&A section, because then that's where we'll be pulling them from. So for people who are doing that, and we'll get to that soon. Um, yeah, do you know, like, do you go further and do you have like an editor pull you back sometimes, or like how, because there's a lot of topics. There's a lot of violence and there's a little bit of like rape, and there's lots of different topics that are covered in your book and some of your other writing as well. So how do you decide to deal with that, or how do you deal with those more difficult topics?
I think as you said, those are themes that I started working on even in my early 20s when I started writing. So I put so much thought into how I would be able to communicate these worlds with, grace and compassion. So I think, and I think, so my editors, they never tell me to hold back in that way. They just they do cut things down, like sometimes, but sometimes I'll be overly self-indulgent in an idea, because then I get so excited about an idea. And actually I remember with because there's a scene where, so Sadie, who is from the Golden Mile, but she gets exiled from her family, so she has to go down the hill to the Squalid Mile. And for some reason, like, I couldn't get her there. Like, it took so long. I was like pages of every single thing she saw, because it was such because I wanted it to have this Alice in Wonderland effect where she just goes down the hole forever and ever and just sees all these different things. But then my editor was like, both editors from the States and Canada were like, why does it take Sadie so long to get down this hill? I'm like, page after page. I was like, didn't you notice it had like an Alice in Wonderland effect? They're like, no, not at all. Just she can take a page to get down that hill. And then, so, it's like works like that, stuff like that.
Mhm. Especially because from what I understand, the neighborhoods are right near each other. So I think this is part of the interesting thing, is that you had this like rich luxury and squalor, like side by
Yeah, and
side.
it's true. They're not actually that far, but they were so different. They were such completely different worlds, and there was no reason. Like, you wouldn't just go for a walk if you were lower class up in the Golden Mile. You would just be sent home. You had to have a reason to be up there. And the same thing, like someone from the Golden Mile would never go down to the Squalid Mile. Just obviously they don't want to see that kind of life, and they'll just be, I don't know, robbed, or their pocket watch will be taken or whatever. So they were so different, and so interesting how, even though they're geographically close, they were just worlds apart.
Mhm. All right. We'll look at some of the Q&A. You mentioned Alice in Wonderland. Janet is asking, what were your favorite books in childhood?
Well, I had ridiculous affection for Lucy Maud Montgomery. Like, that was actually problematic, because I was so in love with Anne. I don't think, like, I could, after I discovered Anne of Green Gables, I didn't even want to speak to anybody else in my neighborhood or my friends. I was just like, you guys all fall short. I have met this young woman named Anne, who is my kindred spirit. I loved her. What else did I love as a child? I loved so much stuff. I mean, I love those picture books. I read them, like Mother Goose rhymes. I remember I had this giant old book. I think I have it right here. Like, this because I started to read really young. I think I started reading like 3 or 4, and this belonged to my great grandmother. This old rickety book of nursery rhymes, and it's so grotesque inside. It's just full of like stains and whatever, but I would just memorize them and read that all the time. So it was always so I read like everything. We'd just go to the library and get your pile. That was so much fun. That was like the best memories of my childhood, going to the library, and that day you spend the whole day choosing your, like, whatever the maximum of books are. You go and you, like, after 8 hours of choosing, put it on the The Desk, and I remember Madeline by Louis Bemelman. What else did I absolutely love? Um, I really liked Scott Odell when I was younger, although I think he's problematic now. He's been like kind of exhumed from the canon because we have other. Um, but that's just when I was very little. Um, and then, do you want to know about like what I was interested as a teenager? And then I started discovering like I remember discovering Jean Genet was like a huge moment for me. And then I started actually, I think the original interest in Anne of Green Gables was there was this young girl who was motherless and in this very lonely situation. So anything I could find that started off with somebody, because I was motherless, my mother abandoned me. So anything that I found where a child was abandoned and was off for adventure, I was just so in love with it because I didn't really, all my friends had mothers and kind of came from these like normal households. So then I found I had to go into books and I found these other lost children. And I was like, oh, I'm not alone. I just, for some reason, I am outside and they are inside. I was like, how do I get inside? If I could only get in the book, then I would have my friends. And then I was like, oh, I'll just start writing.
Yeah. And now you write about them.
Exactly. Now I just create more to people. This.
Janet asked, how old were you when you began writing?
I started keeping a journal when I was like 7 or 8. So I wouldn't call that serious writing, but I did write in it every day, which I think that was a great gift. I don't know why it'd be if I had. I think that's a fun thing to get kids into, just the idea of journal keeping, and not only does it just and they're just little short entries, but not only do you really learn how to write from that, but you also it teaches you just how to observe things in society and to see yourself as like the main character. And I think so often we fall into in life this feeling of like we're being swept away by other people. So I like the idea you're just the main character and your thoughts are important. That's what I love about writing too. Like it gives you this idea that your thoughts are somehow of great value. So I loved that as a child.
Yeah. We have a question here from Wendy asking if you ever do workshops for writers.
I do. I've done them before. Yeah. I don't have any plan during COVID, but yeah, those are always fun. And one of the things I always, one of my favorite prompts during writers' workshops is I always tell people to write about a memory that is sort of like a foundational anecdote. So it's like something that you remember, like a story that you always tell, like when when you meet someone for the first time or on your first date, you have those anecdotes that you share for the first time because you're like, this just sums up. This is my favorite story of myself. So if you take that, because the way we tell stories to each other is the same way we write. We just find these like ways to stage story and like we make them into narratives already. So we already have these wonderful stories. So I always get everyone to write one of those sort of foundational memories, and they can be so funny. Like it could be like somebody once someone was telling a story that their mother had offered them a banana and they were very young, was their earliest memory, and they told the mother they didn't want the banana, and then they went to school and all day they just felt so guilty about not eating the banana and whether their mother was unhappy about it, and then this kind of haunted them for weeks and they just didn't want to. Anyway, so it's just this that's what I would do if this was a workshop. Now I'd get you all to like write about like like a little tiny memory, and you just realize how these little tiny moments that we just put meaning around, and that's what writing is, just these little mundane or shocking, but it's more the meaning we put around it.
Mm-hmm. There's another question here. How does your family react to the characters you create, especially those with questionable motives or character flaws? Um, do they worry about you? And both a silly and a serious question.
I didn't really have like a big extended family. I was raised by my father, and my father was he was like just like a petty criminal, and in his later years he just worked as a janitor because he had a record and whatnot. But he had so many like rough, crazy stories that he would tell me even when I was a little girl, and all his friends were like bank robbers, and they would just sit around the table telling these stories that I quite enjoyed because they're very animated and funny. So it's just to say, like, that at least, I mean, it was very inappropriate way to raise a little girl, but at least it gave me the sense of like, there was nothing I could say or do that would shock them.
Yeah. And then I think you've made those stories into a book as well.
Oh yeah, I have a little wisdom and nonsense, which is lessons that I learned from having like a father who was like unsuccessful criminal. I would say petty crook. 'Cause I'm like, yeah, it's like, but he was a criminal, but we didn't make any money from it.
If people are interested in, other than like reading the book that we're talking about tonight, if people are interested in other books that you've read, is there something that they should start with? Or I also have a poll that we can ask people to see if anyone has read books by you. So, but is there a place that people should start, or does it matter?
Sorry, I couldn't see anything because the poll was in front of my computer screen. I mean, I'm always partial to my last book. Sort of like one of those people when they meet somebody new. If you're in a new relationship and you're just, this person's the one, and everyone's like, boy, that's what you said about the last one. I'm like, no, I was mistaken. This is the one. So obviously this is my favorite. And then I really like the Lonely Hearts Hotel. I think my first one, Lullabies for Little Criminals, it's so long ago that it almost seems, I mean, it's not that long ago, but I think I've just become such a different person. It seems like a lifetime ago to me. So I feel odd recommending that one, but that's one that people love. So if you're not doing this one, either Lonely Hearts Hotel or Lullabies for Little Criminals.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the poll, and out of people who've answered, only 40% of people have read a book by you before. So 60% of people who answered are still beginners. So that's exciting. Welcome. Nancy had a question. How much time do you spend promoting and marketing your books instead of just writing?
A lot, but like I usually write at the same time because it does take up a lot of time, especially when a book comes out, then you do a lot of marketing and stuff, but there's so much there's just so much you kind of constantly have to be doing to reach out to people, and writing essays and whatnot, or doing stuff like this. So I don't know what the question is, like during it for a period of day or a period of time. I don't know. It gets crazy like after a book comes out, but then you end up having like between books, you'll have years of doing nothing, sitting in your living room and writing.
Wonderful. We have a very book specific question. So Avery asks, the character of Jan Pauline is amazing. Is she a mother figure for George and Mary, offering advice and suggestions on how to live life? Do you think women need this type of womanly support? Do you think these women still exist today? Slightly evil, yet helpful?
Yeah, she was like, I loved her too, because she was the older character in the book. So she was the oldest of them all, and she's she's just wiser, and she just gives them perspective. But she has yeah, such a macabre um twist in her, she just believes if a husband is abusive, then a woman has the right to murder them to get them out of the way, because and she's always like supplying arsenic and poisonous pills to anybody who wants them. But at the same time, she's just so wonderful because she has such perspective, and also she's able to see really the different talents of the women when she's bringing them together for revolution. She's like, and she tells them that what values they have and encouragement in a way that because a lot of them are essentially motherless or estranged from their mothers because of Victorian society, and the way they were acting kind of puts them outside of society. So she does actually, yeah, she's like a mother figure to them, I would say so.
We have some comments coming in the Q&A as well. Janet says that she joined the webinar because she heard a reviewer on CBC raving about this book. And then someone else said that they just got it for their Kobo, so they're going to be reading it soon. So that's wonderful. Jane asks if there's a place that you prefer to write from and why you prefer to write there.
I always write in bed. I think I don't know why I find writing like physically exhausting. It just drains me. So I like to I just need to be lying down to do it. Like even like sitting up, because it's so many hours, and it's just like it's like even when I'm lying down, I'm always trying to do something that's not gonna just kill my back. So and I like being in bed, and then my dogs like being in the bed, and I have this big bed and just clutter, and it's like, yeah, I just operate from there. So that's the truth of it.
Wonderful. Let's see. We have still lots of questions, which is great. Oh no, sorry, I have a cat alert. I'm just trying to find one person. Janet has said your life has been full of extremely interesting, with many tensions, and she's wondering if you think that's what is needed to unleash creativity.
That's like a perennial question. We always ask ourselves that. Like I saw this study once that was done in New York, and it found that it actually was true that children with unhappy childhoods were more likely to become creative and enter into like the arts, because I think what it does is it's obviously not necessary. That's it's so you can write about anything, and but I do think that why you do end up having a lot of these strange figures throughout time, with the most abominable childhoods becoming writers, is I think that kind of puts you outside of society. And when you're put outside of society, then you always you just become an observer of it, even just try and figure out, okay, what do I need to do to get into this society? And it really makes you break it down. So it makes you kind of it gives you this perspective and this radical view and this realization, like, wait a second, maybe it's not me, maybe there's something wrong with society. So I think it's that it forces you to be an outsider and to see things from a different perspective. Probably it's probably also, there's been so many great novelists who were gay, and they were also always a bit outside of society and living like on the fringes, and having all their social engagements outside of the mainstream. So they're just able, so then when they talk about society of manners, because they're so used to observing and trying to act in a way that isn't how they normally want to act, then you end up with these marvelous observations about human nature, and you're like, how did you come up with this? And it's like, because I was thrown out and I was forced to watch it like from the window. And I was very envious.
Mhm.
Like that.
And maybe we'll see how long. You have 2 minutes before 8 o'clock. So Lana said she's fascinated by the names of characters in books. And how did you choose the names for the characters in this book?
This one was really fun because whichever I named them was a play on the names of whichever French revolutionary character that had inspired them. So Marie Antoine is actually Marie Antoinette's real name. So that was easy. And then Sadie Arnett was based on the Marquis de Sade. So I took the name. Then he was such an aristocrat that he had so many names like those aristocrats did. So and he's only known by Sade. So Sadie. And then Mary Robespierre is based on her name I got from Maximilien Robespierre. And George is actually George Danton. And Jean-Pauline Marais is based on Jean-Paul Marais, who was this completely ludicrous, bloodthirsty revolutionary. And I think am I missing anybody? No, I think those are my main characters. So I actually had spun their names out of historical characters, which some people have usually people don't pick up on them all, except and some people pick up on a couple, but so that's how I got their names.
Wonderful. Well, I don't know, do you have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay, because this one was asked by 2 different people. So do you use a pen or pencil, or do you write on the computer, or do you write by hand or on the computer? And this will be our last question of the night.
I always write longhand in my notebooks. There's something, I'm a little bit of a graph maniac. I love that feeling. Also, you can put little arrows and so I write in a notebook, and then when I'm done, I type up all my notes and then I edit on the computer. But it always comes first in longhand in my notebooks.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was wonderful. Your book is definitely a treat. So if people at home would like to get a copy for themselves, you can order it from your Muskoka Library. And I think it's slightly cheaper because we get it right from the publisher. So make sure you contact your library tonight or tomorrow to get a copy. And they all come with a signed book plate. So make sure you get that in. Don't forget to follow your library's social media or newsletters, because I think we have a different author almost every month, and we are looking at which ones are going to be in the summer and the fall, and there's some amazing authors to choose from. And if you have any other questions, Heather, do you have social media, or where can people follow you to find out when the next book comes out, or any of that?
I'm on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is actually like Lethal Heroine with an E, and it's actually an anagram of my name. But if you look Heather O'Neill, it'll pop up. And thank you so much, Sarah. That was a really fun conversation, and thank you everyone who came.
Thank you, everyone. Take care and have a good night.